I want you to think of a difficult situation that you've been in your life, or a difficult event, and I want you to think about how you reacted to that, how you handled it. Did you feel sorry for yourself? Probably. Most of us do. But did that continue, or did you just move on? Did that hinder your faith or cause you to lose faith, pull away from God? That's easy to do. And that's easy to do because the devil is going to attack us when we're weak. He knows that we're in these bad situations. He knows that we're focused on this bad event that has happened. And he's going to attack us at that point. And life is hard. Life is really hard. God didn't tell us it was going to be easy. He didn't give us an easy card or an easy button to push. But in Scripture, there's pages after pages of Scripture that show us that even people in the Bible times had difficult situations where life was not fair. And we wouldn't be surprised if they wavered. But a lot of the examples that were given, they stayed strong. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel chapter 3, you know this story. You know, they worshiped God even though the King Nebuchadnezzar is telling them, you're going to fall down and worship me or I'm going to throw you into a fiery furnace. Chapter 3, verses 4 through 6. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people and nations and languages, that at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, and a couple of other instruments that I have no idea how to pronounce, in symphony with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Because of their righteousness, they were punished. Was that fair? Probably not. But like I said, God didn't tell us that life was going to be fair. They didn't do anything wrong. It didn't make any sense for them to be thrown into the fire other than they just didn't do what the king wanted them to do. But their faith did not waver. It didn't deflate. It didn't get less. It didn't lessen. They stayed true. Look at what they said in verses 16 through 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image which you have set up. They stayed true. Either way, whatever happened, they're going to stay true to God. They just said that there. Paul and Silas is another example. They were thrown in prison for getting a demon out of a young lady. And They were dragged in front of their authorities. They were beaten, and they were thrown in prison with shackles on their feet. And what did they do when they were in prison? It would have been real easy to feel sorry for themselves because they did the right thing. They helped this lady. But if you read in Acts, they sang songs and prayed while they were in there. And you know the story. Earthquake came, shackles were loosened, and they were freed from prison. And there are a lot of scriptures like that where people had intense trouble and their faith got bigger. It got stronger. They stayed true to what they stayed true to God. Right now I'm reading a book, and it's very slow because I don't have the time to devote to it, but I'm reading a book by a guy named Louis Giglio. Emily suggested this book to me and let me borrow it. It's called Don't Give the Enemy a Seat at Your Table. And it calls out in there the prophet Habakkuk when he cried out in chapter 3. Don't turn there because it'd take me 15 minutes to find that book too. But he calls out in chapter 3, let me read it to you. Even though there is no harvest, even though the crops have failed, even though the fields are desolate, and even though the stalls of provision are empty, I will still be joyful and glad because the Lord is my God and my Savior. I have not lost my faith. In fact, my faith is greater, is what he's saying. Even though I will. So that's my question for you tonight. Do you have an even though I will faith? Even though this bad thing has happened to me, I will still worship God. I will not pull away from him, no matter what happens. You know what that takes? That takes positivity. If you believe in God and you believe that the best is yet to come, positivity, then you will take the actions necessary to produce that best outcome. And God will help you with that. It also takes discipline. Discipline is essential, but you know what drives discipline? Discipline is driven by devotion. Think about it. If you're not devoted to something, how disciplined are you going to be? If you're not devoted to eating right and eating the right kinds of foods, what are you going to eat? You're going to eat whatever you want to eat. If you're not devoted to learning how to do something, you're probably not going to be able to do it very well. You're not going to be disciplined enough to learn how to do that. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, just like Paul and Silas, they had that even though I will faith. It's a battle for your mind is what it boils down to. And I think this is one of the biggest struggles that we as humans have. We're battling Satan for our mind every single day. And we've got to win those battles. So, we got to be devoted to God. If you're not devoted to God, then you won't have that even though I will faith. Do you have even though I will faith? If not, if anybody here can do anything for you, if you need to confess anything, please come while we stand and sing.
So glad and free. Thank you, Lucas, for leading singing, Brent for that devotional. Good to see everyone here tonight. If you're visiting with us, we're always glad to see visitors. I'd like to welcome you back anytime that you possibly have. I want to thank everybody for, we had a big turnout Sunday for the going away for Jim and Lori and Michelle. They finally got gone yesterday. I went by there about 8:20 yesterday morning. They were supposed to leave about 8:30. Well, moving van hadn't got there yet, so they didn't get gone to, I think, 2 o'clock yesterday. But they did make it safely to Aiken last night late. So be remembering them. As we were leaving Sunday night, Jim said, "Hold on, Terry," says, "I got something I need to give you." And I thought, what in the world is he going to give me? Guess what he handed me? The Candyman bag. I'm not going to be here Sunday. We're going to be out of town. But if anybody wants to be the Candyman, see me. I got the Candyman bag. Now, I do want to let you know there's not a budget for that. Jim bought all the candy himself. But if you're interested in that, please see me. We got a lot going on in this upcoming month. We've got VBS the 3rd through the 5th. Our summer series starts 2 weeks from tonight. Alan Hooper will be our first speaker. Then we've got homecoming with Vance Hutton on June the 30th. So I hope you'll be making plans to be here for all those things. This Sunday, our Love Where You Live groups will be meeting. Austin's group is going to Drew and Kenzie's. Lucas's group is going to their house. The adult group will be here at the building. Also, Group B of our group that be here at the building, you'll be signing compassion cards at 4 o'clock. If you didn't, Group A was the group I'm over, and Adam's group will be Group B, and his group will be meeting this Sunday. So if you wasn't part of Group A, then you're in Group B. So please remember that. We had a really good turnout Sunday. I appreciate all of you that come and help with that. The Preppers Ladies Bible Study, Colossians concluded on Monday. You'll begin a new study on June the 11th. So there'll be more to say about that. We want to remember the baby sprinkle for Holly McCord. Those items are due this Sunday. Please give these to Rachel Biffle or Teresa Stamps, or put those in the office window. We want to remember the Bratcher family. We want to remember Mark. We want to remember his dad, James. Gloria passed away yesterday. That service will be Friday, visitation from 12 to 2, and the funeral at 2. And that will be at Salem. The visitation and the funeral at Salem, burial will be at Greenview. We also want to remember the Schallenberger family. They've been on our prayer list. She passed away, and that service will be on Saturday. So please remember all of these in your prayers. We want to remember Sue Beal, Jerry Heiss, Doris Staggs. Doris, for those of you who don't know, Doris fell taking care of Jimmy, and she's hurt her back. So please remember her. And Jimmy is now on hospice. He is at home. Please remember all of these in your prayers. Anybody have any other announcements? Don't forget, I got the bag. Let me know if you need it. Let's be dismissed at this time. How is everybody tonight? I wish y'all could have seen the grin on Jim's face when he handed me that candy bag. I said, Jim, I don't have time to do that. But I also wished you could have seen him Tuesday morning. It's 8:20 in the morning, and he's sweating profusely. I mean, he's just his whole shirt is wet. They got boxes piled up in the garage, and Lori was out in the driveway talking to one of her neighbors, and she said, Jim's inside, just going in there. So Michelle saw me, and she said, Dad, Terry's at the door. So Jim come to the door, and I went on in. He's running around everywhere trying to get stuff. He says, you ain't going to believe it, bro. He says, moving van hadn't even got here. They were supposed to have been here yesterday afternoon. So they finally showed up. They were only about 18 hours late, I think. So Jim's kind of like me. He don't have patience with things like that sometimes. It's a men thing. But you know, they're going to be blessed. Aiken's going to be blessed with them. We need some people to step up and fill a void in a lot of areas. So I think you can look around and see all the different things that he did. So if you'd like to fill one of them, just go for it. Go for it. We're going to be studying about Joseph tonight. I know the last couple of weeks y'all have studied about when Jacob went to get him a wife. How many years did he work? He thought he was working for Rachel. How many years did he work? Okay, he worked 7 and he got Leah. Then he worked 7 more and he got Rachel. And then y'all talked about last week about Jacob returns home. Turn to Genesis chapter 37. I want to read a couple of verses and then I want to backtrack into Genesis 29 and 30. Genesis chapter 37 says, Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph being 17 years old. So we don't really know anything about Joseph until he's 17. We know that he was born. Turn back to Genesis chapter 29. Look at verse 32. So what was Jacob's first wife that Laban gave him? Leah. So in chapter 29, verse 32, it says, So Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben. And then you'll see down in verse 33, she had another son named Simeon. In verse 34 and 35, you'll see Levi and Judah were born. So you got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. And then in chapter 30, verse 1 says, Now when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, Give me children or else I die. And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, Am I in the place of God, who has held from you the fruit of the womb? So she said, Here is my handmaid, Bilhah. Who does this sound like? Abraham. Same thing that Abraham did. So Rachel gave Jacob her handmaid, and she had a son in verse 6 called Dan. And then another son in verse 8, Naphtali. So you got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali. And then verse 9, it says, when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave to Jacob as wife. And in verse 11, she had Gad. In verse 13, had Asher. And then in verse 18, you'll see that Leah said, God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband. So she called his name Issachar. And then again in verse 20, Zebulun. So you got, how many sons is that altogether? 10 so far. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun. And then they had a daughter in verse 21. Afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. And then in verse 22, then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. So she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. And then a few more chapters over, I think it's chapter 35, Benjamin is born. So you got 12 sons and you got a daughter. Did Jacob learn from Abraham? You know, Abraham did the same thing. Gave his handmaids, gave his maid. Jacob does the same thing. Now turn back to chapter 30, turn over to chapter 35. 35 and verse 16. Here's where Benjamin is born. It says, and they journeyed from Bethel, and when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath, Rachel labored in childbirth, and she had hard labor. And it came to pass when she was in hard labor that the midwife said to her, do not fear, you will have this son also. And so it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben-Anna, but his father called him Benjamin. So you've got 12 sons, and you've got Dinah. Now turn to chapter 37. Chapter 2, or verse 2. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. How many of you had siblings and they brought a bad report of you to your parents? How'd that make you feel? Angry. Okay? Angry. Remember that word, angry. Made you feel angry. Verse 3. Now Israel, which Jacob's name had been changed to Israel, now Israel loved Joseph more than all of his children. What did we talk about 3 weeks ago? Who loved, remember Jacob and Esau? Jacob and Esau, who loved Jacob more? His mother. Who loved Esau more? His father. And what was his father's name? Isaac. So Jacob knows about someone loving one more than the other. But he does the same thing here. It says, now Israel or Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his children. As we talked about 3 weeks ago, does anything good come out of showing partiality to children? Nana. Nilch. I don't know of anything good that comes out of it. It says, because he was the son of his old age, also he made him a tunic of many colors. Listen to what the author has to say about this tunic or this robe. He said, we see this most perhaps in the special robe that his father gave him. Various descriptions of the robe have been given, but the exact meaning is unclear. The simplest description is a robe with long sleeves. Some writers have suggested that the long sleeves denoted authority and special privilege given to Joseph. At this time in their culture, those who did manual labor wore a short sleeve garment. So this robe set Joseph apart from his brothers as well as others. How do you think it made his brothers feel when Jacob, his father, gave Joseph, whom he loved the most, a coat of many colors? Okay, they were already angry. Now they're jealous. How many of you, if you had multiple children, well, how come you didn't get me so-and-so? You got so-and-so something. How come I didn't get that? Well, when I was that age, I didn't get that. Y'all ever heard that? I just sit back and laugh now. We've paid our dues, so to speak. But that's human nature. They become angry. They become jealous. Verse 4 in chapter 37 says, but when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, a while ago we said it was angry. Look here, it says they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. They were so angry, they hated him. And they couldn't even say a kind word to him. They couldn't speak peaceably to him. Now let's top that off by Joseph has these dreams. Let's just read these dreams here. In verse 5, now Joseph had a dream and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, please hear this dream which I've dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And indeed, your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, shall you indeed reign over us? Or shall you indeed have dominion over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And to top that off, he had another dream. And he told it to his brothers and said, look, I've dreamed another dream. And this time the sun, the moon, and the stars have bowed down to me. What do you think his brothers thought? He told them the sun, moon, and stars bowed down to him. Okay, that he was stretching the truth or lying? That he was bragging? Okay. We know this is all part of God's plan. But to his brothers, this would had to have been, I don't really know the word to describe it. Verse 10 says that he told it to his father and his brothers, and his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you've dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? And his brothers envied him, but his father kept this matter in mind. How long does it take someone to get over anger, jealousy, and envy? Long time. Those three things pooled together are not good, are they? They're not good. And his brothers had all they could stand. So what happens? Jacob sends Joseph out to check on his brothers. They where had he sent them? Where had Jacob sent his brothers? Okay, they had went to Shechem. They were feeding the flock. And in verse 13, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers feeding the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send you to them." So he said to him, "Here I am." Then he said to him, "Please go and see if it is well with your brothers and well with the flocks, and bring back word to me." So he sent him out of the valley of Hebron, and he went to Shechem, and a certain man found him. And there he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, saying, "What are you seeking?" When I was reading this, and it says he's wandering in the field, do you think Joseph was familiar with the fields like his brothers was? Probably not. He might have been with them previous times, but it kind of sounds like Jacob kept him close to home, so to speak. Do you think he might have? I think he did. I think he kind of kept him under his wing, kept him close to home. It said he had him in his old age. Verse 16, he said, "I'm seeking my brothers. Please tell me where they're feeding the flocks." And the man said, "They have departed from here. For I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. Look at verse 18. "Now when they saw him afar off, even before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him." How do you think they knew it was him from afar off? Yep. Coat of many colors. That tunic or that robe. And I can just hear them right here. "Then they said to one another, 'Look, this dreamer is coming. Come therefore, let us now kill him and cast him into some pit. And we shall say some wild beast has devoured him. We shall see what will become of his dreams.' But who stood up? Reuben. Who was Reuben? Firstborn. Firstborn. And I think that's important, because why do you think Reuben stood up and he heard it, and he delivered him out of his hands and said, 'Let us not kill him.' And Reuben said to them, 'Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit, which is in the wilderness, and do not lay a hand on him, that he might deliver him out of their hands and bring him back to his father.'" So Reuben's plan was to put him in the pit, then go back and get him and deliver him back to his father. But we know how the history. What happens? I guess Reuben went on to see over the flock, and when he comes back, what had his brothers done? They had sold him to the Ishmaelites. Exactly.
And here they sell him to Ishmael's tribe.
Yep.
I've been trying to piece together ladies taking down Muhammad. And I haven't gotten very far on it, but it just baffles me that Ishmael gets 12 princes, and here they get to buy Joseph.
Yes.
Who's going to save the 12?
Yes. Brother Lewis said he finds it interesting that they sell him to the Ishmaelites. If you remember, Abraham, or Rachel gave Abraham Hagar, his handmaid, to have a child by. And his name was what? Ishmael. So, this is descendants of Ishmael. These were Ishmaelites that his brothers sold him to. And we know that they wound up selling him to who in Egypt? To Potiphar. So, that's the story. Verse 28, it says in chapter 37, Then Midianite traders passed by, so the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. Then Reuben returned to the pit, and indeed Joseph was not in the pit. And he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "This lad is no more. And I, where shall I go?" So they took Joseph's tunic, killed a kid of the goats, and dipped his tunic in the blood. Then they sent the tunic of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "We found this. Do you know whether it's your son's tunic or not?" And he recognized it and said, "It's my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him." Without doubt, Joseph is torn in pieces, and Jacob tore his clothes, put sackcloth on his waist, and mourned for his son many days. The trickster had got tricked. Remember? Jacob tricked Esau. Now the trickster, Jacob, has got tricked by who? His what? His sons. His sons. Because they've sold Joseph. But they make it look like a wild animal had killed him. So, we're looking at the life of Joseph. The lesson's titled Joseph's Dark Days. He went from dreaming these dreams to being put in a pit, to being sold to the Ishmaelites. And now he winds up in Egypt. And we know that God was with him. But I love what the author here has to say, talking about his brothers. He says there's a progression here: jealousy, hatred, murder. The favoritism of their father had led them to be jealous of their brother, and they hated him enough to want to kill him. Let me read that again. The favoritism of their father had led them to be jealous of their brother, and they hated him enough to want to kill him. How many of you know families that favoritism has been shown and it's caused big drifts among siblings? It's not good. It's not good. That's why we need to be fair to all of our kin. And I've told you, my mom and dad went out of the way to show no favoritism in any shape, form, or fashion to me or Dwayne. And they did the same thing with their grandkids. I mean, it was the exact same things that they did for each one of them. So if the oldest or the next, if Chad or Tara got something, you could guarantee that mine was going to get the same thing. I mean, they showed no favoritism at all. But now let's go over to chapter 39. Let's look at Joseph in Egypt. It says, "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And the Lord was what? Was with Joseph. And he was a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. And then he made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put under his authority." How unusual would this be to wind up being over everything in the ruler's house and not be an Egyptian? It would be very unusual, wouldn't it? So, God was with Joseph, and he blessed him, and he blessed the house there that he was in. He blessed the Egyptians. Joseph was doing a great service and a great job there. So in verse 5, so it was from the time that he had made him overseer of the house and all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in the house and in the field. Then Joseph is approached by who? His wife. Said, thus he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. And just a thought from this. I was in my truck this morning going somewhere, and I forget who came on, but it was just a quick 2 or 3 minute little Bible thing. And he was continuing it from the previous days. This is on Kudzu 104.9. And I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about once you're married, you need to be careful in continuing to be in close association with those single people that you used to run around with. Now put yourself in your shoes when you were 20 or 25 if you were married. Would it be good for you to still run around with some of the ones that wasn't? Why? Okay, all right. Who is your devotion to once you get married? Your husband or your wife. Your devotion is to your mate. I just thought I'd throw that out. I thought that was a really good comment that guy was making. He was talking about tips to marriage. He said we need to be really careful in not continuing to try to associate with both sides. Now, does that mean you can't go places with them occasionally? But you don't hang out with them every day. You got to be real careful. But it says here in verse 7, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast longing eyes on Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has committed all that he has to my hand. There is no one greater in this house than I, nor has he kept back anything from me but you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" Joseph was speaking the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, wasn't he? As the old saying goes. But verse 10, look at verse 10. So it was as she spoke to Joseph, what? Day by day, that he did not heed her, to lie with her or to be with her. So what does this tell you? Joseph was confronted how often? Daily. Daily. And he did the right thing. And we know what happens. He goes in. He refuses to lie with her. He runs out. And she catches the what? Catches the garment. And then she tells a lie to her husband. And Joseph is what? Thrown into prison. And that's kind of where the lesson ends here this week. But what does this tell you about Joseph's character? He was a good guy. Okay? Okay? All right. Think of that, and now think back when he's having the dreams and he's telling them to his brothers. Do you think Joseph was arrogant when he was telling those dreams? Or do you think he was just being honest and truthful? I think that gives us a little bit better light of him telling those dreams to his brothers. He was telling the truth, but of course his brothers didn't want to hear it. Him being younger than them, for one thing, and then them bowing down to him being another. So, I think we can see both sides of the coin. Listen to what the author says. It says, life started out well for Joseph. He was the favorite of his father and enjoyed special treatment. Then things started to go wrong, hated by his brothers, thrown into a cistern, sold as a slave, wrongfully accused by his master's wife and sent to prison. Things could not have gotten much worse for Joseph. There's no doubt that these experiences were painful and distressful, but even in all of this, God was with him. Look in chapter 39. Somebody read verse 2. Okay? The Lord was with Joseph in verse 2. Somebody read verse 5. Okay, he blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. Somebody read verse 21. So he was with Joseph, showed him mercy. And then somebody read verse 23. The Lord was with him. It's told us 4 times in that chapter that the Lord was with him and blessed him. Let me ask you some questions in closing. Why did Joseph's brothers hate him? Okay. All right. That's the root of the problem. Yes. Do you think he loved his handmaids the way he did Rachel? It could have been. Yeah. And I would say, right. It doesn't tell us for sure, but probably so. What could have been done to lessen the tension in that family? Among the brothers. Okay. Reckon what Dinah had to say in all this? Probably nothing. The author here says, we notice that God was with Joseph in his difficult times. Why didn't God just fix his problems? Okay? Does God fix all y'all's problems? We got to ask Him for His help, and He'll help us fix them. And they may not be fixed in the time period that we would like them to be fixed, but in His time they will be. He asked here, what positive traits do you see in Joseph's character? He was committed. What else? I definitely think he would have had to have known. It doesn't ever tell us that God spoke to Joseph. This was, so we don't know, but he blessed him in everything he did. The Lord was with him. I think Joseph would have known that he had a purpose. And that's evident from the unfolding of the rest of the history through the end of Genesis. What other traits do you see in Joseph? Was he trustworthy? Had to have been, wasn't he? To have been put over everything in his ruler's house. What else? He was forgiving. Yes. And we're definitely going to see that in the following chapters. When he first saw his brothers, what did he have to do? Had to go to the other room and cry. You think he was humble? Even though he was in authority, he was very humble. These are all traits of Joseph. Exactly. Who does that remind us of? And while they were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Died for you. Died for me. That's hard for us to fathom, that God loves the murderer. He loves those that are killing innocent human beings. He hates the sin, but He loves the sinner. And, that's one thing that Adam has stressed in going over the evangelism tools that we're using. It's not up to us to pick and choose who we want to share the gospel with. It's our duty to do what? Share it. Plant and water. Plant and water. God will provide the increase. The last question he asked is, what are some principles in Joseph's life that we can also apply to our life today? Okay? Constant belief that God is with us. You're right. You're right. In Brent's lesson tonight, I don't want to misquote exactly what he said, but our devotion will determine our Somebody finish that for me. I didn't want to forget that saying he come up with. What was the rest of it? Anybody remember? I'm going to have to ask him when class is over, because that was good. I'm trying to remember exactly how it went. Basically, our devotion to a cause is going to determine our drive that we have to complete it. Joseph was committed. Joseph was committed to the cause. And it was all part of God's plan. Him being sold by his brothers to the Ishmaelites, all of his family coming from the land down to Egypt, They grew strong while in Egypt. How long were they in captivity there? 400 years. And they grew to
Some estimates are negative 2.5 million and some estimates 4.
I know when you read the Exodus and you try to count all of them, it's a vast number. I mean, they grew from Jacob's family up to the